A short time ago, an American airplane dropped one bomb on Hiroshima and destroyed its usefulness to the enemy. That bomb has more power than 20,000 tons of TNT.
At 8:15 on August 6, 1945, the world changed forever. An atomic B-29 bomber deployed an atomic bomb on Hiroshima, a Japanese industrial center that was home to major military headquarters. 3 days later, a second atomic bomb was dropped on Nagasaki. At the same time, this was one of Japan's largest seaports. The two bombings resulted in an estimated 200,000 casualties. The survivors of the bombings suffered from thermal flash burns that gradually formed into keloid scars, and a sickness that was brought upon by fallout radiation. Children of the atom bomb survivors were shown to have birth defects as a direct result of their parents' brief but significant exposure to radiation. The generational trauma that stemmed from these events cannot be understated, and it has shaped the nation of Japan in such a significant way. This formative time in the nation's history gave way to a lot of pain and suffering. Japanese filmmakers and artists wanted to create art that reflected the horrors that they went through. However, this was quite difficult, as at the time, strict American censorship prevented this, and it wasn't just art that was censored. The Japanese press also experienced a lot of harsh censorship. Any material that was deemed too politically or morally subversive would just be banned. This would include anything from advocating for communism, pornography, and the glorification of militarism. While America's censorship would eventually fizzle out by 1952, people were still wary of content that explicitly referenced the atomic bombs. In 1954, a Japanese production company known as Toho Studios was planning on producing a film titled In the Shadow of Glory. The film was a joint project with Perfini, an Indonesian production company. The plot of In the Shadow of Glory would have been based around the aftermath of Japan's occupation of Indonesia during World War II. The film would ultimately never get made due to a strong anti-Japanese sentiment from Indonesian citizens, many of which pressured the government to deny visas to the Japanese filmmakers from Toho. Tomoyuki Tanaka, a producer at Toho, flew to the capital of Indonesia in an attempt to renegotiate with the government on their decisions. The renegotiations were ultimately unsuccessful, and In the Shadow of Glory would never be completed. On the flight back to Japan, a very somber Tomoyuki Tanaka gazed out the window of his plane and began daydreaming about seeing a giant monster in the ocean below. He thought to himself, what if a giant monster awoke from nuclear radiation and attacked Japan, taking residence in Tokyo Bay? Little did he know, that monster would be known around the globe as a cultural icon, named Godzilla, and what followed was a franchise with 35 sequels and spin-offs, not to mention the countless imitators like Gamera, Reptilicus, Yangeri, and Gappa. Tanaka hired Ishiro Honda to helm this project. Honda was known as a competent director and a frequent collaborator of Akira Kurosawa. At the time, his most recent film was a very successful World War II epic titled Eagle of the Pacific. Eiji Tsuburaya was tasked with creating the special effects for the film, and Akira Ifukube composed what would become the iconic Godzilla theme. With this scrappy but experienced team, history was about to be made. Did you know that data brokers are out there selling your information to scammers, spammers, and basically anyone who wants to target you? Your full name, email, home address, health records, even your relatives, it's all out there. That's why I've been using Aura, the sponsor of today's video. Aura shows me exactly which data brokers are selling my information and automatically submits opt-out requests on my behalf. Cleaning up my information reduces spam and protects me from hackers who could access my YouTube channel, bank accounts, and other sensitive information. I don't know if you saw this, but AT&T recently revealed that over 73 million customer records, both from existing and former customers, were released on the dark web. This is huge news, and it shows why using Aura is so important right now. Experts recommend using strong passwords, monitoring account activity, and considering credit freezes or fraud alerts from credit bureaus. Well, Aura does all of this for me. And best of all, I don't have to download all these different apps just to keep my data secure. With Aura always on, I don't have to worry about data breaches. Aura is always doing the hard work of keeping me safe. I value my privacy and I value yours. You can go to aura.com/firewood down in the description to start your 2-week free trial. Thank you again to Aura for sponsoring today's video. The film opens with the loud sound of footsteps, followed by Godzilla's iconic roar. The Godzilla March then begins to play over the opening credits. After this, somewhat relaxing yet eerie music begins to play as sailors on a Japanese freighter relax during their downtime. Out of nowhere, the freighter is destroyed by an unseen threat. At first, there is blinding light. The sailors who witnessed it fall to the ground in agony. One of the surviving sailors attributes this mysterious tragedy to Godzilla, a legendary sea monster. To do more investigation, a collective of journalists and news reporters travel to Odo Island. One of the reporters is told by a local that something in the sea is destroying the island's fishing industry. The reporter's helicopter is destroyed by a storm that hits the island that evening, and Godzilla, whom some of the locals briefly see, destroys 17 homes, killing 9 people and decimating 20 of the villagers' animals. Residents of Odo Island travel to Tokyo to request help. The devastation described by the locals and the reporter's evidence is consistent with a huge object crushing the village. Paleontologist Dr. Yamane is sent by the government to head a study on the island. After hearing the village alarm bell, Dr. Yamane and the villagers rush to see the monster but turn around when they realize it's a huge dinosaur. Dr. Yamane presents his research in Tokyo, where it is believed that Godzilla is a 50-meter tall monster and originated as a marine beast before becoming a terrestrial creature. He comes to the conclusion that underwater hydrogen bombs have disturbed Godzilla. There is discussion on alerting the populace to the threat posed by the monster. 17 ships are currently at sea and lost. 10 frigates are sent to use depth charges to try to kill the creature. Dr. Yamane is disappointed with the expedition since he wants to research Godzilla, not kill him. Officials ask Dr. Yamane for advice on how to kill Godzilla after it survives the attack. But Yamane responds by saying that Godzilla is invulnerable because it has survived H-bomb testing and must be studied. Due to her love for salvage ship captain Hideo Ogata, Dr. Yamane's daughter, Emiko, chooses to call off her pre-arranged marriage to Yamane's colleague, Dr. Serizawa. When a journalist shows up and requests to interview Serizawa, Emiko leads the journalist to Dr. Serizawa's house, who offers Emiko a demonstration of his most recent creation in exchange for keeping it a secret after he declines to discuss his ongoing work with the reporter. She is horrified by the demonstration. Emiko walks away without disclosing the engagement. She gets back to her house just before Godzilla attacks Shinagawa from Tokyo Bay. Godzilla retreats to the water after destroying a passing train. A 30-meter tall, 50,000-volt electrified barrier is built along the coast by the Japanese Self-Defense Forces, who also send out troops to stop and kill Godzilla. Godzilla reappears, uses its atomic breath to scale the fence into Tokyo, where it unleashes further havoc on the city. Godzilla returns to the water after more failed attempts to kill it with jet fighters and tanks. The dead and injured are crammed into hospitals and shelters the following day, and some survivors are sick with radiation. Emiko, devastated by the destruction, tells Ogata about Dr. Serizawa's research on the oxygen destroyer, a weapon that breaks down oxygen atoms and kills organisms through decaying asphyxiation. Dr. Serizawa initially rejects Emiko and Ogata's attempts to persuade him to use the oxygen destroyer, explaining that if he does so, the world's superpowers will undoubtedly require him to build other oxygen destroyers to use as superweapons. Dr. Serizawa finally agrees to their requests after viewing a show depicting the country's current misery. Emiko begins to quietly sob as Dr. Serizawa burns his notes, so that the oxygen destroyer can never be recreated. Ogata and Dr. Serizawa are transported by a Navy ship to Tokyo Bay to plant the bomb. Serizawa locates Godzilla, detonates the weapon, and disables his air support, which results in his death. Though Godzilla is slain, Dr. Serizawa's passing is lamented by many. In an introspective yet grim moment, Dr. Yamane states that another Godzilla could emerge in the future if nuclear weapon testing continues. In case it wasn't obvious, Godzilla isn't just a monster movie. It's a powerful allegory for the devastation of nuclear warfare, but It's also an extremely effective horror movie. Godzilla looks absolutely terrifying in black and white. Honestly, I think this movie holds up so well because of its monochrome look. The special effects that could be really bad are hidden by the dark shadows and black and white color palette. Don't get me wrong, there are some shots here and there where Godzilla does look pretty rough, and not in a good way, but regardless, it works. A lot of people like to rip on Godzilla movies for having awful human characters. Trust me, we'll get there when we get there, but I think the characters in this film work exceptionally well. The character conflicts, particularly Dr. Serizawa's struggle with the morality of his invention, adds a ton of depth to the narrative. While it's unlikely that the filmmakers at the time had heard the name of Robert J. Oppenheimer, Serizawa acts as a stand-in for the inventor of the atomic bomb. Akihiko Hirata's performance is fantastic, and he brings a real sense of tragedy to his entire character. Again, the only comparison that I can even think of right now is Cillian Murphy's portrayal of Oppenheimer. Meanwhile, Emiko's emotional conflict adds a human touch amidst the chaos. The love triangle of sorts between her, Serizawa, and Akira Takarada's Ogata is a really interesting aspect of the movie. While he is the most well-known actor out of the three, it's kind of funny considering that Takarada sort of takes a back seat to Emiko and Serizawa. The two best performances in the entire film have to go to Haru Nakajima and Katsumi Tezuka, who both portrayed Godzilla. I feel like Katsumi Tezuka rarely gets mentioned, but a lot of that has to do with the fact that the majority of his scenes were cut from the final film due to the suit being very hard on his body. During the initial fitting, Nakajima experienced a mishap inside the suit when he stumbled and fell. It's well publicized that the Godzilla suit was essentially torture to wear, so they split the first suit into two parts, one for close-ups with ropes to help Nakajima, and another for full shots, which was lighter but still tough on Nakajima's body, as he could only last around 3 minutes before passing out. During filming, Nakajima lost 20 pounds. Despite all that, he gives the performance of a lifetime. This never really feels like it's a man in a suit. It feels like a living being. I could go on and on about how much of a technical feat this film truly is, but what I really want to talk about is why this film matters to Japanese culture, the nation's history, and of course, film history. While I did start this retrospective talking about the historical significance, I still want to expand upon those thoughts here. Producer Tomoyuki Tanaka has stated several times that the film's core theme was the terror of the bomb. This theme is visually and narratively reinforced throughout the movie. The scenes of destruction caused by Godzilla are hauntingly similar to the real-life footage of post-bomb Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Buildings crumble, fires rage uncontrollably, and the populace is left in a state of panic and helplessness. Director Ishiro Honda skillfully embeds the idea of Godzilla being an allegory for the devastation of nuclear warfare without it being overbearing or preachy. A lot of the time we're just shown the destruction as is. We don't have some guy yapping in our ear about how catastrophic everything is. Don't worry, Raymond Burr, we'll get to you soon. Now, part of me is a bit torn on the ending of the movie. Dr. Yamane outright states, "I can't believe that Godzilla was the last of his species. If nuclear testing continues, then someday, somewhere in the world, another Godzilla may appear." On one hand, it feels like the film is outright telling the audience, hey, nuke's bad. But on the other hand, the lack of subtlety just kind of reminds me of the original King Kong, where Carl Denham outright tells the audience it was beauty that killed the beast. In a way, it works. It fits right in with the time period. After all, it's a movie about a giant monster destroying Japan. I feel like some subtlety can go by the wayside here and there. The film served as a cathartic experience for Japanese audiences, allowing them to confront the horrors of the atomic bombings in a way that was indirect yet powerful. They just outright couldn't make a biopic or whatever of the bombings happening. It would have been too real for them. And on top of that, too, it would have been censored by the American government. So this was the best way to go about it. The monster's rampage through Tokyo is a visceral reminder of the destruction of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, creating a space for collective mourning and reflection. By personifying nuclear devastation in the form of Godzilla, the film made the abstract fears of radiation and annihilation more tangible and approachable. In addition to addressing past traumas, Godzilla also reflects the national anxiety about nuclear technology and its potential for future catastrophes. During the 1950s, the threat of nuclear war loomed large over the global stage, and Japan, as the only country to have experienced atomic bombings, had a unique perspective on this threat. The film encapsulated these anxieties, presenting a scenario where humanity's hubris and technological advancements led to its own potential destruction. The themes of Godzilla remain relevant today, as concerns about nuclear technology and environmental destruction persist. The monster's story has been revisited and reinterpreted in numerous films, each iteration addressing contemporary issues while staying true to the original's core message. This relevance underscores the timeless nature of the film itself and its importance as a cultural touchstone. Before we wrap up talking about the original 1954 film, I feel like it's extremely important to talk about the 1956 Americanized version, Godzilla, King of the Monsters. This version gets a lot of hate from people, and I can completely understand why. They treat the audience like they're a bunch of preschoolers with constant narration over everything happening on screen. So many scenes are ruined by having Raymond Burr just stating exactly what's happening right in front of my eyes.
Now he's making his way toward the city's main line of defense. 300,000 volts of electricity strung around the city as a barrier.
The editing is also just bizarre, mostly due to the fact that they are shoehorning in the original Japanese footage with new footage featuring Raymond Burr as the American journalist Steve Martin. The scenes that are left untouched visually are still strong. However, it's just so odd how Burr is inserted into the film. He does a decent job with what he's given. 2 years prior to being in this film, he was the villain in Rear Window, which is a role that he absolutely killed, pun intended. Shortly after King of the Monsters, he would star in the TV series Perry Mason as the titular character. Unfortunately, though, Burr is pretty much only known as being the American guy that was shoehorned into the US version of Godzilla. He was a really talented actor, and you could tell he was doing his best, but the character of Steve Martin is just so boring and one-dimensional. It's actually kind of funny how he just approaches the characters from the original film and talks to them like they're Skyrim NPCs.
And how is Serizawa?
His health is fine, but he regrets not being here to meet you.
Something wrong?
Dr. Serizawa had to go inland on some field experiments.
It's all just so stilted and awkward. A lot of that is because of the limited blocking. These aren't the real actors, they're just body doubles at points. Is it creative? Yeah, for the 50s, it's super interesting trying to piece together how they filmed this. The character of Steve Martin was created to provide a point of view for American audiences and to help explain the events of the film to a non-Japanese audience. Through his interactions with the other characters, Steve Martin serves as a proxy for American audiences, providing a connection to the events of the film and helping to ground the story in a more familiar cultural context. Back then, you really couldn't have just dubbed this and then released it into American theaters. Americans would have been just like flabbergasted by it. They wouldn't have understood it. So having Raymond Burr in here kind of helped to hold their hand. But nowadays, it's just completely pointless. Beyond the addition of Steve Martin, Godzilla King of the Monsters outright removed any references to the bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. You never hear any of the characters specifically say atom bomb or hydrogen bomb, which just turns the movie into a generic monster flick, rather than what it actually is, a powerful allegory for the devastation of nuclear warfare. Going back to some of the other changes made, Akira Ifukube's iconic theme for Godzilla is noticeably absent here. The original score was replaced with a new score composed by American composer Harry Essex, which emphasized the film's more action-oriented scenes and downplayed its dramatic and emotional moments. The film's visuals were also altered for the American release, including the removal of some of the more graphic depictions of violence and the addition of special effects to enhance the film's monster scenes. Overall, Gojira, the Japanese version, is not just a sci-fi classic, but a timeless masterpiece that continues to resonate today. Its potent message about the perils of nuclear weapons remains incredibly relevant, while its groundbreaking special effects and compelling narrative ensure its place as essential viewing for film buffs and monster movie aficionados alike. It's no wonder that this film is celebrated as one of the best in the franchise. In the grand scheme of things, Godzilla is vital not only to film history, but also to the history of Japan as a nation. Its influence extends far beyond its initial release, shaping both Japanese culture and global perspectives on nuclear warfare. In Japanese culture, Godzilla has transformed from a symbol of nuclear devastation to an emblem of resilience and survival. This shift reflects the indomitable spirit of the Japanese people in overcoming adversity. The legacy of the 1954 Godzilla film endures. Beyond all of the sequels, all of the remakes, all of the spin-offs in the franchise, this movie serves as a powerful reminder of the past and a cautionary tale for the future. And with all of that out of the way, I'm Cole McCormick. You're watching Firewood Media. This is part one of many in my Ultimate Godzilla retrospective. I'm going to be reviewing and reflecting on every single Godzilla movie and TV show ever made. I've already covered the American ones so far, so if you want, you can go to the channel, find the playlist for the Ultimate Godzilla retrospective, and watch those. Ideally, I want to start getting these out weekly, so Godzilla Raids Again is up next. Hopefully it's out next week. If not, then the week after. It'll at least be out next month, for sure. I want to start making these a bit quicker. This one took me a while to write, in case you couldn't tell. This entire retrospective should be 100% finished a year from now. So I've been writing these videos since my freshman year of college, and if you want kind of like a timetable, I'm graduating college in the winter with my bachelor's degree. So that goes to show you how much I've been working on this. Anyways, with all that out of the way, I just want to say, if you want to support the channel, so I can keep making videos like these and release them more frequently, consider becoming a member to support the channel. It's kind of like Patreon, but for YouTube. Just $1.99 a month, you'll get member shoutouts, your name featured as an executive producer in all of our film projects. There's members only videos, behind the scenes stuff. There's so much stuff. It's crazy. Anyways, you don't have to if you don't want to. It's an extra perk for anyone that wants to support the channel while getting to see some unique content. Either way, thank you so much for watching. I'll see you in the next one.